Matilda of Flanders, born around 1031, was destined for a life far beyond the ordinary confines of a noblewoman's world in the 11th century. Born into the powerful and influential family of Baldwin V, the Count of Flanders, her early years were steeped in the luxuries of royal court life. Yet, even as a child, the political intrigues of the court were never far from her reach, shaping her future in ways she could never have imagined. This was a time when the great kingdoms of Europe were shifting like tectonic plates, where alliances were as fragile as they were crucial, and where the ambitions of a single ruler could change the course of history. Flanders, a region that spanned parts of modern-day Belgium, France, and the Netherlands, was a wealthy and strategically important territory in medieval Europe. Baldwin V, Matilda's father, ruled it with an iron fist, but also with an understanding of the fragile nature of power. His domain was a rich tapestry of trade, culture, and military might, an area known for its burgeoning cities, fertile lands, and an ever-growing influence in the European political theater. Baldwin was not only a count but also a man deeply invested in the future of his family, constantly seeking ways to increase his influence. It was through this lens of ambition that Matilda's life began to unfold. As a young girl, Matilda was well educated, a luxury not often afforded to women of the time, especially those of lesser noble birth. Her lessons were tailored to her status as a potential political asset, with a focus on languages, history, and the arts of diplomacy. Yet, it wasn't just academic knowledge that she absorbed from her surroundings, it was the very essence of court politics. She watched as her father navigated the intricate web of alliances, deals, and rivalries that defined the nobility's way of life. The ability to survive in such a world depended not just on one's wit and intelligence, but also on a keen understanding of power dynamics. Baldwin knew this well, and as he groomed his daughter for a future role as a key player in European politics, Matilda grew both wise and ambitious. In the early years of her life, Matilda was perhaps most influenced by her mother, a figure whose influence was less apparent in the annals of history but no less significant. Baldwin's wife, known for her grace and dignity, served as an example of the kind of woman Matilda was expected to become. Matilda's mother was more than just a wife, she was a trusted advisor and a skilled diplomat in her own right. She helped maintain peace in a land where war was never far off, often negotiating with neighboring kingdoms and acting as a buffer between Flanders and the more powerful realms of France and Germany. It was against this backdrop that Matilda first learned the art of negotiation and the subtlety required in shaping one's fate. At an age when most young women would have been confined to the quieter, domestic parts of court life, Matilda was already emerging as someone with a unique combination of intelligence, charm, and a deep understanding of power. Her father's strategic mind and her mother's wisdom blended within her, and this would soon become her most valuable asset. Yet, despite her extraordinary lineage, Matilda's future was not set in stone. In the 11th century, the fate of a woman, particularly one born to noble blood, was often dictated by marriage. As Matilda grew older, the marriage market was the arena in which her fate would be sealed. Marriage alliances were not merely about love or companionship, they were about power, security, and political gain. For a noblewoman, a marriage could elevate not only her personal status but also the fortunes of her family. And so, as Matilda approached her teenage years, her father began to seek out a suitable match, one that could secure Flanders' position in the complex chessboard of European politics. One such match loomed on the horizon, a union that would forever alter the course of Matilda's life. A young and ambitious duke from the neighboring Duchy of Normandy had already begun to make waves in the political scene. William, Duke of Normandy, known as William the Bastard due to his illegitimate birth. William had already demonstrated a ruthless determination to overcome the odds stacked against him. His rise to power had not been easy, and his claim to the throne of England was as uncertain as it was controversial. Yet, there was no doubt about his ambition, nor his ability to transform Normandy into a formidable power. The match between Matilda and William was not one of love or passion. Rather, it was a calculated decision, one that would bring together two of the most powerful and ambitious families in Northern Europe. For Baldwin, this marriage was a strategic alliance. one that would secure his family's position in the volatile landscape of European politics. For William, the marriage to a woman of noble Flanders blood would not only bolster his own claim to England but also provide him with the political legitimacy he so desperately needed to solidify his rule over Normandy. Matilda's acceptance of William's proposal, while politically advantageous, was a turning point in her life. The marriage was not without its challenges. She was asked to leave behind the comforts of her native Flanders, where she was a respected and influential figure in her own right, to travel to the court of a man she barely knew. Yet, in her eyes, this was a stepping stone towards something greater. Matilda understood the political power that lay in her union with William, and she approached it with a level-headedness that would serve her well in the years to come. As Matilda made her way to Normandy, the court there was nothing like the one she had known in Flanders. William's realm was one defined by its harsh, militaristic culture, where power was fought for and maintained through force. The transition from the comfortable, trade-oriented world of Flanders to the turbulent and warlike court of Normandy would not be easy. But Matilda was no stranger to the world of politics. She quickly adapted, learning the ways of William's court and understanding the intricacies of his rule. In the years that followed, as Matilda settled into her role as the Duchess of Normandy, she and William would form a powerful partnership, one based on mutual respect, political alliance, and a shared ambition for greatness. The couple's shared vision would lead them to conquer not just Normandy, but eventually England itself, creating a dynasty that would change the course of history. As Matilda settled into her new life in Normandy, she quickly understood the intricacies of William's world. Unlike Flanders, Normandy was a land built on military conquest and strategic alliances. The court was not a place of gentle diplomacy alone, but also of hard-fought power struggles. This was a realm where strength was respected above all, and where the weight of ambition could make or break a ruler. But Matilda, with her noble bloodline and acute political instincts, proved herself to be more than just a passive participant in this world. William, the ambitious and often ruthless Duke of Normandy, had already shown his mettle by consolidating power in a land rife with internal division. His early life had been marked by challenges. The death of his father when William was just 8 years old left him as an orphaned child. But through determination and strategic alliances, he had grown into a leader of considerable strength. Despite his illegitimate birth, which had earned him the nickname, William the Bastard, he had proven himself capable of commanding respect and loyalty from his followers. His rise from a young, vulnerable ruler to a powerful, commanding duke was a testament to his shrewdness and resilience. For Matilda, however, the task ahead was far more subtle and complex. As William's wife, she was no mere figurehead. From the moment she entered William's court, Matilda worked tirelessly to earn her place at his side, though she had been raised with the understanding that her marriage was a political tool. She did not shy away from the power that came with it. Instead, she immersed herself in the day-to-day affairs of governance. At times, when William was away, it was Matilda who took charge of Normandy's internal matters. She proved herself capable of managing both the economic affairs and the politics of the duchy, earning the respect of the nobles around her. In the early years of their marriage, William and Matilda's relationship was characterized by a powerful partnership. While William was often consumed by military campaigns and political maneuvering, Matilda played a crucial role in ensuring the stability of Normandy. Whether it was organizing the defense of the duchy or ensuring the loyalty of the local lords, she was instrumental in keeping the realm in order. One of the most notable aspects of their relationship was their mutual respect for each other's abilities. William was not a man prone to trusting others easily, especially not in the high-stakes world of medieval politics. But with Matilda, he found an equal partner. Matilda, in turn, saw in William not only a husband but a man whose ambition and resolve matched her own. Their union was not built on romantic love, but on the shared understanding that together they could achieve something great. It was in these early years of their marriage that Matilda's political acumen began to shine. She proved herself adept at navigating the complex web of alliances, rivalries, and power struggles that defined the medieval world. Her ability to act as a mediator, negotiator, and decision-maker made her an invaluable ally to William. As her influence within the court grew, so too did her role as a trusted advisor to William. She was not just the dutiful wife, but a vital part of the machinery of power that drove Normandy forward. While Matilda's role in Normandy was primarily political, she was also a mother. Over the course of their marriage, William and Matilda had several children, including their firstborn son, Robert Curthose, who would later become Duke of Normandy. Matilda's devotion to her children was unwavering, and she worked hard to ensure that they were raised to be strong, capable heirs to William's expanding empire. Yet, as any mother would, she also had to balance her responsibilities as a mother with her growing influence in court and her increasingly significant role in the governance of Normandy. As Matilda's children grew older, so did her desire to solidify their futures. In a world where power was often determined by bloodlines and alliances, Matilda understood that the futures of her sons depended on her ability to navigate the complex and often dangerous political landscape. It was not just a matter of arranging marriages, it was about positioning her children within the web of European politics to ensure their survival and success. Matilda's actions in this regard would prove crucial in securing the dynasty she and William had built. While her responsibilities in Normandy were vast, Matilda's role as William's wife was not without its challenges. Normandy was a land of constant warfare and internal strife, and William was often away leading campaigns to expand his influence or to defend his realm from external threats. During these absences, Matilda stepped into the role of leader. As the Duke's wife, she had not only the right but the responsibility to ensure that Normandy's interests were protected. Her leadership was a reflection of her own strength, and over time, the nobles of Normandy came to recognize her as more than just a woman of noble birth. She was a ruler in her own right. Throughout these early years, Matilda's influence over William continued to grow. While his ambitions for conquest and power were never in doubt, it was Matilda who often guided him with her calm, reasoned counsel. She understood the importance of alliances, not just through marriage but through diplomacy, and she was keenly aware of the need to maintain the loyalty of the various factions within Normandy. Her skills in managing these relationships helped to secure William's position, and, by extension, her own. It was during this time that William began to look beyond the borders of Normandy, eyeing the rich and powerful Kingdom of England. The death of King Edward the Confessor in 1066 created a power vacuum that many sought to fill. For William, the throne of England was within reach, but claiming it would not be easy. He would need the support of his nobles, his family, and, most importantly, his wife. Matilda, as always, was by William's side. It was clear that the journey ahead would be perilous, and yet Matilda remained resolute. As William prepared to embark on his fateful invasion of England, Matilda's role in his success could not be overstated. Her political acumen, her ability to manage the duchy, and her unshakable support for William laid the foundation for what would be one of the most important military campaigns in medieval history, the Battle of Hastings. As the years passed, Matilda's role in Normandy solidified. Her influence in the court grew, and her reputation as a competent and decisive leader spread throughout the duchy. But with every year that passed, a greater challenge loomed on the horizon: the succession to the English throne. By the mid-1060s, the situation in England was in turmoil. King Edward the Confessor, whose reign had lasted more than 30 years, died without a clear heir. This created a political vacuum that would soon become the focus of international attention. In the chaos that followed, multiple claimants arose, including Harold Godwinson, the most powerful Anglo-Saxon nobleman, and William, Duke of Normandy, who argued that he had been promised the throne of England by Edward before his death. Matilda, ever astute, knew that this crisis could not be ignored. England represented not only a vast and wealthy kingdom but also an opportunity to expand William's power and influence across the Channel. In the spring of 1066, as William prepared to claim his inheritance, Matilda stood by his side. It was not merely the role of a supportive wife. She had become William's confidant and his most trusted advisor. The battle for England would be a momentous and dangerous undertaking, but Matilda's political savvy helped ensure that William was well prepared for the challenge. The journey to the throne of England would be a perilous one. For years, William had prepared for this moment, gathering allies, strengthening his military forces, and establishing a network of support from across Normandy and beyond. He knew that, in order to be successful, He would need to secure not only the loyalty of his own men but also the backing of powerful figures in Europe, and Matilda played an instrumental role in fostering those relationships. As William's fleet of ships set sail toward England in the summer of 1066, Matilda remained behind in Normandy, holding the reins of the duchy in her husband's absence. Her leadership would prove essential during this time, as William's military campaign in England would require months of uncertainty. Matilda, ever the skilled diplomat, kept the home front secure, managing relations with both the Norman nobles and the English inhabitants who had already begun to resist the foreign invader. Her wisdom and composure allowed her to navigate the political currents of the day with finesse. William's campaign would ultimately culminate in the Battle of Hastings on October 14, 1066, where Harold Godwinson was defeated, and William claimed the English throne. The battle was a defining moment not only for William but for Matilda as well. Though she was not physically present at the battle, the success of the campaign was, in many ways, a reflection of her influence. Her role in ensuring that the logistics of Normandy were taken care of, in maintaining the loyalty of the Norman forces, and in supporting her husband in his strategic decisions were integral to the eventual victory. Upon William's return to Normandy, and in the wake of his conquest, Matilda's importance only grew. She was crowned Queen of England in Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066. As the first queen consort of the newly established Norman dynasty, this moment was not just a ceremonial act, it was a symbol of the marriage between two powerful realms. Matilda's presence on the throne alongside William cemented the union of Normandy and England and signified her pivotal role in the consolidation of Norman rule over the Anglo-Saxon population. However, Matilda's role was never simply that of a queen consort. Her work was far from finished. As the Queen of England, Matilda immediately became a key figure in the reconstruction of the kingdom. With William focused on securing the rest of England, Matilda took charge of overseeing the day-to-day governance of their new realm. She played a critical part in establishing Norman rule in England, working to establish order and quell rebellions. Her ability to manage the complexities of both England and Normandy ensured that the new dynasty had a firm foundation. But her leadership wasn't without its challenges. The Anglo-Saxons, having been conquered but not yet fully assimilated, continued to resist the Norman invaders. Throughout her reign, Matilda faced uprisings and rebellions, many of which required her personal involvement in negotiations and military actions. In particular, the north of England was a hotbed of resistance, with frequent uprisings threatening to undo William's work. As queen, Matilda was not just a political figure, she also had a deep commitment to religion, something that would further strengthen her position. She worked closely with the church to establish religious reforms that aligned with the goals of the Norman rulers. Her patronage of the church and her involvement in religious matters helped to solidify William's control over the newly conquered territory. In a world where the church was a central institution, Matilda understood the value of gaining the church's favor and support. She was instrumental in ensuring that the Anglo-Saxon clergy were brought into alignment with the Norman crown, a feat that would further solidify their rule over England. As the years passed, Matilda's influence remained steadfast. Her reputation as a wise and capable leader continued to grow, and she would become one of the most respected women in medieval Europe. Yet, her work was far from over. As her children grew, Matilda took on the role of protector of her family's future. Ensuring that her sons would inherit the combined realms of Normandy and England became a priority. Her relationship with William remained one of mutual respect and shared ambition. And together, they laid the groundwork for a powerful dynasty that would influence European history for generations to come. But the road to a lasting legacy would not be without its obstacles. As William's reign advanced, the political landscape of Europe began to shift once more. And with it, the balance of power. Matilda's involvement in the shaping of that future would become even more crucial as she continued to navigate the turbulent waters of 11th-century European politics. It was clear that she would not simply be remembered as a queen consort but as a co-architect of the Norman Empire, a legacy that would endure far beyond her lifetime. The year 1066 marked not just the conquest of England but the beginning of a new era for the Norman dynasty. As William the Conqueror solidified his grip on the throne, Matilda of Flanders found herself at the heart of this monumental shift in European power. No longer just a young bride adjusting to the royal life of Normandy. She now stood as Queen of England, an influential figure in her own right. The weight of this newfound power was immense. But Matilda was not one to falter. Together with William, she would face the arduous task of reconciling two worlds, the Anglo-Saxon and Norman populations, and ensure that their reign would be as enduring as it was transformative. As soon as William's victory was secured at the Battle of Hastings, the complexities of ruling a newly conquered kingdom became apparent. The Anglo-Saxon nobility was disillusioned, many resenting their new Norman rulers, while the southern regions of England fell into line under William's command. The north and west remained strongholds of Anglo-Saxon loyalty. The task before William and Matilda was clear: how to manage these rebellions and bring unity to a fractured realm. Matilda's role in this process was pivotal. She was not merely a figurehead, not simply the wife of a conquering king. She was an active and strategic partner in ensuring the kingdom's stability. When William left for Normandy or to deal with matters of state, it was Matilda who took charge, managing the day-to-day administration of England. At the outset, her focus was on securing the loyalty of the English nobility. One of the most critical actions Matilda took was to foster relationships with the Anglo-Saxon elites. While many nobles had lost land and titles to the incoming Normans, Matilda worked to ease tensions. She sought out diplomacy, using her calm, measured demeanor to diffuse potential uprisings. In these delicate matters, Matilda's political skills were invaluable. She knew how to negotiate, how to maintain peace, and how to ensure that the system of feudalism would benefit not just the Normans but also the Anglo-Saxons, who would need to feel some level of investment in this new order. Her diplomatic skills extended to her relationships with the Church as well. The Church had been a cornerstone of Anglo-Saxon life, and William knew that gaining the favor of religious leaders would be key to maintaining control. Matilda's efforts in this area were crucial. She worked with the clergy to establish the new Norman religious order. The ecclesiastical leadership, many of whom were loyal to the Anglo-Saxon kings, were skeptical of Norman rule. Yet, through her own efforts, Matilda helped facilitate the transition, ensuring that the Church was fully integrated into the new political landscape. She supported the construction of new abbeys and cathedrals, projects that aligned with William's vision for a Norman-ruled England while also honoring the traditions of the Anglo-Saxon Church. By 1067, Matilda's reputation as a wise and capable queen had spread beyond England and Normandy. She was no longer just the consort of a conqueror, she was a sovereign in her own right. A respected figure whose advice was sought by both English and Norman nobles. Her influence began to extend beyond the palace, and her voice carried weight in matters of governance. Her reign marked the beginning of a more structured form of Norman English rule, one that would lay the foundation for the flourishing of the kingdom in the centuries to come. But Matilda's power was not just political, it was also familial. As the queen consort, she was expected to produce heirs to secure the future of the dynasty. William and Matilda's relationship was rooted in mutual respect, but it was also deeply pragmatic. They had 6 children together, and Matilda's role as a mother was just as vital as her role as queen. She was deeply invested in the futures of her children, particularly her sons, who would one day inherit the lands of Normandy and England. The early years of their lives were marked by Matilda's careful guidance and her focus on ensuring their education, discipline, and preparation for the weighty responsibilities that lay ahead. As William turned his attention to securing his position in England, Matilda took charge of overseeing the upbringing of their children. Her maternal instincts were evident as she ensured they received the best possible education for their roles as future rulers. Matilda's influence on her sons was profound. She instilled in them the same sense of duty and ambition that had guided William throughout his own rise to power. Robert Curthose, their eldest son, was groomed to take the title of Duke of Normandy, while William Rufus, their second son, was positioned to succeed William on the throne of England. The legacy of the Norman dynasty depended on these children, and Matilda's vision for their future was clear. But Matilda's motherhood was not without its challenges. Raising children in the volatile world of medieval politics was a delicate task. The court was full of intrigue, rivalries, and shifting alliances. Many within the Norman and Anglo-Saxon nobility saw the children of William and Matilda as potential threats or pawns in their own power struggles. Throughout this period, Matilda worked tirelessly to protect her children and ensure their safety. Her leadership was not limited to the halls of power. It extended to the very home she had built with William, where the future of their empire was nurtured. Amidst the political intrigue and domestic affairs, Matilda's influence in the governance of England became more pronounced. While William traveled across his realm, overseeing military campaigns and solidifying his control, Matilda remained in England, keeping the kingdom stable and ensuring that their policies were enacted. Her presence in the court, though often overshadowed by William's military achievements, was no less vital to the kingdom's stability. As queen, she worked on building relationships with the local lords and overseeing the implementation of feudal law. However, as the years went on, Matilda's relationship with William became more complex. William, the conquering king, had to focus on the expansion and defense of his newfound kingdom. His responsibilities often took him away from Normandy and England for extended periods of time. During these absences, Matilda's role grew, but so did the political pressures that came with it. As the queen consort, she had to balance her maternal role with her political responsibilities. The growing tension between these dual roles would ultimately define her time as queen. The next phase of their reign would bring more challenges and more opportunities. The stability that Matilda had helped to create was put to the test when rebellions broke out in the north. The Anglo-Saxon population, still resentful of the Normans, began to push back against their new rulers. These uprisings would test the strength of William and Matilda's reign, pushing the queen to make even more difficult decisions in her role as a political leader and protector of the dynasty. As we move into the next chapter of their story, Matilda's influence will become even more central to the survival of the Norman rule in England. And the legacy she built alongside William will continue to shape the course of history. The conquest of England had been a tremendous achievement for William the Conqueror, and Matilda, now Queen of England, stood beside him in the aftermath of their victory. But her influence was not limited to the royal courts of England alone. Matilda's legacy and power were deeply rooted in Normandy, the land that had given birth to their dynasty. While William ruled England, Matilda's role as Duchess of Normandy became more central to the future of both Normandy and England. As the queen consort, Matilda's work was far from over. Her attention was divided between the consolidation of power in England and her continued responsibilities in Normandy. When William left for England or other campaigns, it was Matilda who took the reins of governance in Normandy. Her leadership skills, honed during their marriage and political partnership, were now tested on a larger scale. She was more than just the wife of a king, she was a powerful figure in her own right. Managing both the internal and external affairs of one of the most strategically important territories in medieval Europe. Normandy, with its coastal position in proximity to England, was a key part of the Norman Empire. It was the base from which William had launched his conquest of England. And Matilda understood that securing its future was essential for the stability of both realms. Her role in Normandy required her to navigate the complex political landscape of the duchy, which was full of competing interests, rivalries, and noble families vying for power. As Duchess, Matilda was not only responsible for managing the day-to-day affairs of Normandy but also for ensuring that her husband's authority was maintained while he was absent. One of Matilda's greatest strengths was her ability to govern with a firm hand. Normandy was a region fraught with conflict, both internally and externally. There were frequent disputes between the powerful Norman nobles, and keeping them loyal to the crown was no easy task. Yet Matilda was a master at managing these relationships. Her political acumen allowed her to mediate conflicts, broker alliances, and maintain peace among the factions vying for power. She was able to balance the competing interests within the court, ensuring that Normandy remained stable and strong in the face of both internal strife and external threats. Matilda's political skills were further tested when Norman nobles began to chafe under William's rule. As the Duke of Normandy, William had concentrated power in his hands, and many of the older, more traditional nobles were resistant to the changes he had brought to the region. Matilda understood that her husband's success in Normandy depended on the loyalty of the nobility. and she worked tirelessly to ensure that the new Norman nobility remained united and loyal to the crown. While William was focused on consolidating power in England, Matilda's influence in Normandy continued to grow. She was not only involved in political negotiations and the administration of justice but also in the development of the region's economy and infrastructure. Matilda understood that the prosperity of Normandy was essential to the success of the entire empire. She worked to improve the infrastructure of the duchy, supporting the construction of castles, roads, and fortifications that would serve both defensive and economic purposes. She also supported the growth of trade and commerce, ensuring that Normandy remained a vital hub of economic activity in Europe. In addition to her political and administrative duties, Matilda's role as the mother of William's children was just as important. As their children grew, Matilda took a hands-on approach to their education and upbringing, ensuring that they were prepared to one day inherit the vast territories that William and Matilda had built. Their eldest son, Robert Curthose, was being groomed to inherit Normandy, while William Rufus, their second son, was being prepared to take the throne of England. Matilda's influence on her children was profound. She instilled in them a sense of duty, responsibility, and ambition, just as she had with her husband. Her sons would one day inherit the empire she and William had worked so hard to build. And it was Matilda's guidance that would shape their future. But life as the ruler of Normandy was not without its challenges. The power struggles between the Norman nobles were a constant source of tension. Matilda had to walk a fine line, maintaining her authority while appeasing the powerful families that were essential to the stability of Normandy. Her political prowess allowed her to navigate these challenges, but there were times when her authority was tested, especially as William's attention turned more and more toward England. The tension between Matilda and some of the more rebellious elements in the Norman nobility came to a head when William made the decision to go to England full-time, leaving Matilda to govern Normandy in his absence. While William had full faith in her abilities, the nobles of Normandy were not always as convinced. Some resented Matilda's increasing influence and power, feeling that a woman should not wield such authority. This resentment would occasionally flare up, leading to conflict within the court. Despite these challenges, Matilda proved time and again that she was more than capable of ruling Normandy in her husband's stead. She faced these internal divisions with grace and firmness, using her diplomatic skills to maintain peace and order. She was respected not just for her political acumen, but for her ability to mediate and resolve conflicts in a way that preserved the stability of the duchy. As the years went by, Matilda's influence over Normandy continued to grow, and she became an indispensable figure in the governance of both Normandy and England. Her political achievements were often overshadowed by the more dramatic military exploits of her husband. But Matilda's contributions were no less significant. She ensured that William's empire remained stable and united, managing both the internal affairs of the Norman court and the complexities of ruling over a diverse and sometimes rebellious kingdom. The challenges of governing Normandy and England were not without their toll on Matilda. As she juggled her duties as a mother, a wife, and a ruler, she was often faced with the difficult task of balancing her personal life with her political responsibilities. While William was away, Matilda often found herself dealing with rebellions, political maneuverings, and the demands of ruling a vast and diverse empire. Yet, through it all, she remained resolute. Her strength, both as a political leader and a mother, ensured that the empire she and William had built would endure for generations. The death of Edward the Confessor in 1066 set in motion a chain of events that would forever change the course of history. Edward, the King of England, had died without leaving a clear heir, sparking a fierce contest for the throne. The throne was coveted by several claimants, but the one with the most legitimate claim, according to many, was William, Duke of Normandy. He believed that Edward had promised him the throne, a claim backed by his cousin, the powerful Earl Godwin of Wessex, and several other influential figures in England. However, Harold Godwinson, the powerful Anglo-Saxon noble and brother-in-law to Edward, had also laid claim to the throne and was crowned king shortly after Edward's death. This sparked a conflict that would ultimately lead to one of the most significant battles in English history, the Battle of Hastings. For William, this was more than just a battle for a crown. It was a mission that was as much about destiny as it was about power. He had been raised with a sense of entitlement and ambition, believing that the throne of England was his birthright. His marriage to Matilda had only strengthened his resolve, as it brought him closer to the powerful European elites and solidified his standing in the world of high politics. But beyond the political advantages, there was a deeper motivation. William believed that his rule would bring a new order to England, one that would unite the fractured Anglo-Saxon kingdoms and restore the greatness of the realm. Matilda, too, understood the importance of this moment. Although she remained in Normandy during the lead-up to the invasion, she played a critical role in supporting William's claim, both politically and emotionally. She was his closest confidant, and her diplomatic skills were vital as William rallied support for the invasion. Matilda helped secure key alliances with other rulers in Europe, ensuring that William would have the resources and support he needed to mount a successful campaign. Her influence was felt at every level, through the network of Norman nobles who supported William's claim, the church leaders who provided legitimacy, and the soldiers who would march with William to England. As William prepared for the invasion, Matilda's support was unwavering. She remained behind in Normandy, taking charge of the duchy and overseeing the day-to-day affairs while her husband assembled his forces. She understood that the success of the invasion depended on more than just the military might of Normandy. It required unity and stability within the duchy. Her management ensured that Normandy was secure, enabling William to focus on the critical task ahead. The preparations for the invasion were immense. William gathered a fleet of ships, recruited soldiers, and forged alliances with other rulers, including the King of France. Matilda, ever the strategist, kept a close eye on the situation. She worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring that the logistics of the invasion were carefully planned and that the Norman forces would have everything they needed for the long campaign ahead. In the summer of 1066, William set sail for England. His forces, composed of thousands of soldiers, archers, and cavalry, landed on the southern coast of England in September. The invasion, which had been long planned and meticulously executed, was a defining moment for both William and Matilda. William was determined to claim what he believed was his birthright, and Matilda's unwavering support only strengthened his resolve. As the invasion began, Matilda's role remained crucial. While William was in the field, she continued to govern Normandy, ensuring that the duchy remained stable and that the Norman forces had the supplies they needed to continue their campaign. Her leadership and diplomatic skills were indispensable during this time of uncertainty. She kept the peace in Normandy and was instrumental in maintaining the morale of the Norman people, ensuring their loyalty to William. The Battle of Hastings, fought on October 14, 1066, would be the pivotal moment in this epic struggle. The battle itself was a brutal and decisive confrontation between William's Norman forces and the Anglo-Saxon army led by King Harold II. The English forces, though courageous and determined, were ultimately defeated by William's superior tactics, including the use of archers and cavalry, and the strategic feigned retreat that lured the English into a trap. Harold too was killed during the battle, and with his death, William's claim to the throne was secured. In the aftermath of the battle, William was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day, 1066. This was the moment that would forever change the course of English history. William, now William the One of England, had achieved what many thought was impossible. But his victory was not just a testament to his military prowess. It was the culmination of years of careful planning, political maneuvering, and the unwavering support of his wife, Matilda. Although Matilda was not present at the Battle of Hastings, her role in William's victory could not be overstated. She had been his most trusted advisor, helping him secure the alliances that made his victory possible. Her influence was felt in every corner of the Norman world, from the battlefield to the court. As soon as William returned to Normandy, he was eager to establish his rule in England, and Matilda's role as Queen of England was solidified. William's coronation was a moment of triumph, but it was also the beginning of a new set of challenges. The Anglo-Saxon nobles were not eager to accept their Norman rulers, and the process of pacifying the country would be long and difficult. But Matilda, ever the capable and strong-willed queen, immediately took an active role in the governance of England. She worked alongside William to consolidate Norman rule, using her diplomatic skills to secure the loyalty of the Anglo-Saxon nobility. As queen, Matilda faced a multitude of challenges. The conquest of England had brought with it a vast array of complexities, rebellions, the integration of the Anglo-Saxon population into Norman society, and the distribution of land and titles. Matilda, however, was no stranger to the intricacies of governance. She quickly established herself as a queen capable of maintaining order and securing William's reign. Her political acumen was on full display as she worked to maintain the peace and ensure that the new Norman order would take root in England. But Matilda's efforts were not limited to the political realm. She also worked to support the Church, which had been a central institution in Anglo-Saxon England. She was instrumental in securing the support of religious leaders, ensuring that the Church would remain loyal to the Norman crown. Through her patronage of religious institutions, Matilda helped establish the legitimacy of William's rule in the eyes of the Church and the English people. The conquest of England was, in many ways, just the beginning. Matilda's role as queen consort and as a powerful force in her own right would shape the future of England for years to come. Her influence on William's rule was undeniable, and together, they would lay the foundations for a new era in English history, one that would be defined by the strength of the Norman dynasty. The Battle of Hastings was a monumental victory, one that secured not only the English throne for William but also set the stage for the establishment of the Norman dynasty in England. However, despite this decisive battle, the true task of securing William's rule had only just begun. The conquest of England was not a simple affair of military victory. It required the delicate work of pacifying a conquered population, establishing Norman rule over a people who were fiercely proud of their Anglo-Saxon heritage, and navigating the complex web of political and social relations that held the country together. Matilda, Queen of England, played an indispensable role in the aftermath of the battle. While William was preoccupied with ensuring that his forces maintained control over England's major cities and fortifying key strongholds, Matilda remained behind in Normandy, overseeing the duchy and maintaining the stability of their lands. As the battle raged on in England, Matilda's leadership in Normandy ensured that the Norman war machine continued to function smoothly, providing support for William's campaign through logistics, reinforcements, and financial backing. It was during the period after the Battle of Hastings that Matilda's influence in the Norman English world began to expand. As soon as the news of Harold II's death reached the Norman camp, William was quick to move to London to claim the throne. Yet, the journey to securing the throne was far from straightforward. The Anglo-Saxon population had not simply accepted their defeat. There were pockets of resistance, particularly in the north, where the people had long harbored resentment towards the Normans. Although the southern parts of the country had fallen under William's control, the northern territories remained a stronghold of Anglo-Saxon resistance, and the work of pacifying these rebellious regions would be a daunting challenge. In the face of this unrest, Matilda's role became more vital than ever. William, having secured his coronation on Christmas Day, 1066, returned to Normandy to reassert his authority and prepare for his final efforts to crush any lingering rebellion in England. But even in his absence, Matilda stood at the forefront of the Norman administration in England. The English crown was not simply a matter of military dominance, it required political finesse, alliances, and the cultivation of loyalty among the various Anglo-Saxon nobility who had been displaced by the new Norman order. Matilda's influence was critical in maintaining the loyalty of the Anglo-Saxon lords who had not yet pledged allegiance to William. She understood that the key to long-term success was not just force, but the ability to govern with wisdom and compassion, especially in the face of a resentful population. She worked tirelessly to manage the delicate balance of power in the newly conquered kingdom. For example, she made efforts to reassure the Church and maintain its loyalty to the crown, knowing that the support of the Church would be essential for the legitimacy of Norman rule. In 1067, Matilda played a key role in calming the simmering unrest among the Anglo-Saxon nobility. She led negotiations with important Anglo-Saxon lords, including those who had lost land to the Normans, offering them opportunities to retain some of their holdings under the new Norman system. Though the Normans took control of large swaths of land, Matilda recognized that cooperation, rather than force alone, would be necessary to stabilize the kingdom. She persuaded William to offer certain Anglo-Saxon lords land in exchange for their loyalty, while also encouraging the introduction of feudal laws that would bind them to the Norman crown. Despite these efforts, resistance continued. The most significant threat came from the north, where the Anglo-Saxon nobility and some Viking factions united against the new rulers. The Northern Rebellion culminated in the infamous harrying of the North in 1069 to 1070. A brutal campaign in which William, determined to crush the last vestiges of resistance, laid waste to large swaths of northern England. Matilda's role during this period was both diplomatic and supportive. Although she was not directly involved in the military action, she provided logistical and financial support to William's campaign and worked to maintain stability in the southern parts of England. The harrying of the north was a ruthless strategy, but it was effective. The devastation of the region, which saw entire villages destroyed and thousands of people displaced, broke the spirit of the northern rebels. Over time, the resistance faded, and with it, the last pockets of Anglo-Saxon power. William's control over England was solidified, but it came at a great cost, both in terms of human suffering and the long-term relationships between the Anglo-Saxon population and the Normans. As the dust settled from the northern rebellions, Matilda's influence over the newly conquered realm only increased. She was more than just a queen consort, she was an active participant in the governance of England. Matilda's diplomatic efforts were instrumental in ensuring that the conquest was not simply about the destruction of the Anglo-Saxon world, but about creating a new political and social order in which the two cultures could eventually coexist. Albeit under Norman rule, Matilda was also integral in the rebuilding of England's infrastructure, a task that would take many years. The creation of Norman castles and the imposition of Norman law became central to maintaining control over the vast territory that William had claimed. Throughout this period, Matilda remained an important patron of the church and the arts, ensuring that the Norman influence would extend beyond military and political rule into the very fabric of English society. Meanwhile, William's focus on consolidating power in England did not mean that he ignored Normandy. Throughout this period, Matilda continued to manage Normandy, ensuring that the duchy remained stable and prosperous. She reinforced the loyalty of the Norman nobles and expanded the duchy's influence in France. Though William had claimed the English throne, it was Matilda's careful governance of Normandy that kept the heart of their empire intact. Despite her growing political influence and respect, Matilda's position was still not fully secure. The initial acceptance of her rule was largely due to William's military dominance. But the real challenge was to build an enduring legacy. This required not only military and political strength but also the establishment of a lasting cultural and social order. Matilda's involvement in fostering these changes was vital. She was instrumental in supporting the development of the Domesday Book, the great survey that detailed landholdings, resources, and taxable property across England. This monumental document was not only an essential tool for governance but also a testament to the way in which Matilda had shaped the new Norman order. By the end of 1070, most of the rebellions had been quelled, and the Anglo-Saxon nobility, now fully aware of the might of their Norman rulers, had largely been forced into submission. The task of ruling England had become William's primary focus, but Matilda's influence in both England and Normandy was unquestionable. As queen, she was both a political figure and a cultural ambassador, helping to bridge the gap between the Anglo-Saxon and Norman worlds. The conquest of England was now complete. William, Duke of Normandy, had established himself as King William I of England, but the task of turning this victory into a lasting kingdom would require far more than military victories. The true work of establishing the Norman rule was not just about defeating armies, it was about weaving together two distinct cultures, rebuilding a fractured society, and ensuring that the rule of the new king would endure. And in this work, Matilda's role as Queen of England became indispensable. Matilda's influence was no longer just a reflection of her marriage to William. She had become a central figure in the governance and stabilization of the Norman Empire. As William focused on securing his rule and expanding his power, Matilda was the steady hand at the helm in both England and Normandy. While William dealt with external threats and the logistics of ruling over a vast kingdom, Matilda focused on managing the internal affairs and cementing the Norman influence over the Anglo-Saxon population. As Queen of England, Matilda's first task was to ensure that the conquest did not alienate the people of England entirely. The Anglo-Saxon nobility had already suffered significant losses. Many had been dispossessed of their lands. Their power diminished by the arrival of the Normans. Yet, Matilda understood that while William had used force to conquer the land, it was diplomacy and careful governance that would ensure the Norman legacy in England. Her approach was measured. Matilda did not simply impose Norman law over the Anglo-Saxons, she worked to build bridges, offering them opportunities for collaboration and participation in the new order. The first steps in this process involved the management of English lands. Matilda made it clear that there was space for Anglo-Saxon nobility within the new feudal system. Though it was now a Norman system of governance, her role in overseeing the land distribution through William's instructions was vital. The land was granted to William's loyal Norman followers, but a few Anglo-Saxon lords were kept in place or given back some of their holdings in exchange for loyalty. This delicate balancing act helped maintain stability in the southern and central parts of England. But Matilda's influence went beyond land deals and diplomacy. She began to play an essential role in the development of the legal and administrative systems that would shape Norman rule in England. She worked closely with church officials to ensure that the church remained a vital part of the newly established political order. The church, which had been a powerful force under the Anglo-Saxon kings, became even more closely aligned with Norman rule under Matilda's guidance. This helped solidify the legitimacy of William's reign, as the church's backing gave the Norman kings not only spiritual authority but also the practical ability to govern. The building of castles across England was another strategic element of the Norman consolidation. Matilda was instrumental in supporting the construction of these fortresses, which served as military strongholds, symbols of Norman authority, and centers of governance. These castles were strategically placed to keep the Anglo-Saxon population in check, and they would become iconic representations of Norman dominance. The castles also provided a sense of security for the Normans, allowing William and his nobles to maintain their grip on power. Matilda, too, was involved in the overseeing of these constructions, using her position to ensure that they were not just military fortifications, but also centers of economic activity and governance. Though William's focus was primarily on external relations and securing his empire, Matilda's influence was deeply felt in the inner workings of the kingdom. She was actively involved in supporting William's policies regarding land redistribution and taxation, using her diplomatic skills to manage the complexities of these sensitive issues. Her role as a mediator between the Norman and Anglo-Saxon nobility was indispensable. She helped to smooth over tensions and keep rebellion at bay by fostering relationships between the two groups. Matilda's power and influence also extended to her position as mother to their children, ensuring that the next generation of the Norman dynasty was well prepared to inherit the vast territories and responsibilities that would fall to them. Her eldest son, Robert Curthose, had been named heir to the Duchy of Normandy, while William Rufus, the second son, was groomed for the English throne. Their upbringing was shaped by Matilda's careful planning and guidance. The education of her sons was of paramount importance, and she saw to it that they were trained in the arts of governance, diplomacy, and warfare. But Matilda also understood that ruling was about more than just military might or political cunning. It was about building a lasting legacy. Her sons would one day inherit not only her husband's empire but also the wisdom she had instilled in them. While Matilda's role was critical to the consolidation of the Norman Empire, her work was not without opposition. Resistance to Norman rule was not entirely extinguished. The north of England remained a stronghold of Anglo-Saxon sentiment, and sporadic uprisings continued throughout the early years of William's reign. The most notable of these came from the north in the form of the rebellion of the Anglo-Saxon noble Hereward the Wake and his allies. Although the rebellion was eventually crushed, it showed that the conquest was far from complete in the eyes of many. In these turbulent times, Matilda remained a steady and influential figure in the administration of the kingdom. Her diplomatic efforts helped to keep the peace and mitigate the impact of these uprisings. While William focused on putting down the rebellions, Matilda focused on the longer-term work of integrating Anglo-Saxon nobility into the new order. This included overseeing the assimilation of Anglo-Saxon landowners into the new feudal system, encouraging loyalty through both reward and strategic marriages. Her diplomatic work during this period ensured that the foundation of Norman rule in England would be far stronger than it might have been otherwise. Matilda's role as Queen of England was not just about supporting William, it was about building a legacy of her own. She worked tirelessly to establish a political and social order that would survive long after her time. Her influence reached far beyond the court and the battlefield. She was a key architect in the creation of the feudal system that would come to define English society for centuries to come. Her support for the church, her involvement in land distribution, and her ability to broker peace between the Normans and the Anglo-Saxons ensured that her husband's conquest would have lasting and far-reaching effects. Matilda's reign was marked not only by political victories but also by cultural and social achievements. As queen consort, she patronized the arts, education, and the construction of churches, ensuring that the Norman influence would be felt in every corner of England. Her contributions to the development of English society were vital, and her legacy would endure long after her death. Together with William, Matilda built not just an empire but a lasting dynasty. Her wisdom, diplomacy, and unyielding support for her husband ensured that the foundation of Norman rule in England would survive the trials of rebellion, resistance, and rebellion. As the queen consort, Matilda became an integral part of the success and prosperity of the Norman Empire, and her legacy would resonate in English history for generations to come. As the years passed, Matilda's role in the Norman Empire evolved, not only as queen consort but also as a devoted mother to her children. Her influence was not confined to the political and military spheres, it extended to the future of the Norman dynasty. For Matilda, the legacy of her husband, William the Conqueror, was not simply about securing political control, it was about ensuring that the next generation would inherit a stable and prosperous kingdom. By the time William had secured his rule over England, Matilda had already given birth to several children, including their eldest son, Robert Curthose, who was groomed to inherit the Duchy of Normandy, and William Rufus, who was destined to become King of England. Their other children, including Henry, who would later become King Henry I of England, and Adela, who was married into various noble families, also played crucial roles in shaping the future of the Norman dynasty. Matilda's devotion to her children was unwavering. She understood that her sons' futures were tied to the kingdom they would one day inherit. As any mother would, she wanted to ensure that they were not only raised as strong leaders but were also equipped with the political and military knowledge necessary to continue the work she and William had started. The education of her children was a priority for Matilda. She ensured that they received a well-rounded education, one that prepared them for the challenges they would face as rulers. Robert Curthose, as the eldest son, was the heir to Normandy. Matilda worked closely with William to ensure that Robert was given the best possible training in the art of governance, diplomacy, and warfare. Robert was expected to one day govern Normandy, and Matilda made sure that he was taught the intricacies of managing a powerful duchy. She was involved in his upbringing at every step, ensuring that he understood the complexities of ruling a large and diverse territory. However, Robert's relationship with his father and his mother was not without complications. As Robert grew older, tensions between him and William began to surface. Robert was ambitious, but he also harbored a sense of resentment towards his father for not allowing him to fully assume power over Normandy. Matilda, while deeply protective of her son, found herself caught between her husband's expectations and Robert's growing desire for independence. These tensions would later come to a head. But during these formative years, Matilda's guidance was crucial in shaping Robert's early understanding of leadership and governance. William Rufus, the second son, was being prepared to inherit the English throne. Unlike Robert, William Rufus was more ambitious and eager to prove himself on the battlefield. Matilda, while nurturing, encouraged his fierce determination, knowing that William Rufus would need to be strong and assertive if he were to one day rule England. She worked closely with her husband to prepare William Rufus for kingship, ensuring that he would have the political savvy to navigate the complexities of ruling a kingdom that had once been filled with resentment and unrest. Despite their different personalities, Matilda's influence on her sons was marked by a common thread. She instilled in them a sense of duty to their lands and their people. She understood that leadership required more than just military might, it required wisdom, diplomacy, and the ability to build lasting relationships with the nobility. As a mother, Matilda provided both love and guidance. But she also knew when to push her children to develop the qualities that would make them successful rulers. Matilda's influence extended beyond her sons. Her daughter Adela, who would later become Countess of Blois, was raised with the same political acumen and sense of duty that characterized her mother's approach. Adela, like her brothers, was carefully educated in the ways of governance and diplomacy. Matilda ensured that Adela would one day play an important role in the alliances that would strengthen the Norman dynasty. The women were often excluded from direct political power in medieval Europe. Matilda made sure that Adela would not be left out of the important discussions that shaped the future of the empire. Matilda's role as a mother was not without its challenges, especially as she navigated the difficult terrain of court politics. While William was often away on military campaigns or managing the affairs of England, Matilda remained in Normandy, overseeing the education of her children and ensuring that they remained firmly rooted in the traditions of the Norman court. She was the stabilizing force in their lives, ensuring that they understood their responsibilities as future rulers, even as they faced the difficulties that came with their inherited power. As the years passed, Matilda's relationship with her children became even more critical. William's health began to decline in the 1070s, and the question of succession became a pressing issue. Robert Curthose, as the elder son, was expected to inherit Normandy, but the growing rift between him and William led to friction between father and son. William Rufus, eager to prove himself, was positioned to succeed his father as King of England, but he too faced challenges in navigating the complex political landscape of his inherited kingdom. Matilda's role in these struggles was one of mediator and protector. She was often called upon to provide counsel to both her sons, helping to navigate the challenges of succession in political rivalries. Her strength, wisdom, and sense of justice made her an invaluable advisor to both William and her sons. While William was focused on maintaining control over his empire, Matilda took a more personal approach, working to ensure that the family remained united, even in the face of growing tensions. But it was not only her sons who benefited from Matilda's guidance, her daughters, too, were crucial to the dynasty's future. Through strategic marriages, Matilda ensured that the Norman influence would extend beyond the borders of England and Normandy. Her daughter Adela's marriage to Stephen, Count of Blois, solidified an important alliance with the French nobility. These alliances were vital to ensuring the survival of the Norman dynasty in the face of external pressures. And Matilda's influence in securing these marriages was instrumental. The challenges Matilda faced as a mother and protector of her children were immense, but she navigated them with grace and determination. Her children, though often caught in the turmoil of their father's ambitions and the political intrigues of the time, grew to understand the weight of their responsibilities. Matilda's influence helped shape them into the rulers they would become, and her role as a mother was key in ensuring the longevity of the Norman dynasty. Matilda's legacy, then, is not just one of political achievement and administrative prowess, it is also a legacy of motherhood, love, and protection. She was not just a queen consort, nor merely the wife of a conqueror. She was a mother who understood the importance of preparing her children for the challenges they would face as leaders. Her wisdom, her sacrifices, and her unwavering dedication to the future of the Norman dynasty would ensure that her family's rule endured, leaving an indelible mark on the history of England and Europe. While William's victory at the Battle of Hastings in 1066 had secured the throne of England, the real work of governance was far more complicated. William knew that simply defeating the Anglo-Saxon King Harold II and assuming the crown was not enough. The Norman conquest had uprooted centuries of Anglo-Saxon traditions, and the resistance among the Anglo-Saxon population was far from quelled. The task of imposing Norman rule over a kingdom deeply rooted in its own culture, with centuries of history, was fraught with challenges. Matilda, now deeply entrenched in the political fabric of the Norman Empire, faced her own set of trials. The conquest was only the beginning. William's control over England was constantly tested by rebellions, especially from the Anglo-Saxon lords and the northern territories. Despite William's efforts to placate some of the Anglo-Saxon elite, the kingdom remained restive, particularly in the northern and western parts, where the resistance to Norman rule was most fierce. The north and the revolts. The most significant and prolonged opposition to Norman rule came from the north, where the Anglo-Saxon nobility had retreated after the defeat at Hastings. The north of England, particularly Northumbria and Mercia, had long been centers of power in Anglo-Saxon England, and many of the northern lords resented the new rulers. It was not just the loss of land that caused unrest, it was the loss of identity and autonomy. Many Anglo-Saxons viewed the Normans as foreign invaders, and their rule was seen as illegitimate. The first major rebellion after the conquest erupted in the winter of 1067. A group of English nobles, along with some disaffected Normans, launched an uprising in the southwest of England. This revolt, known as the Revolt of the English, was aimed at driving the Normans out of the kingdom. The rebels sought to install Edgar Atheling, the last surviving member of the Anglo-Saxon royal family, as their figurehead and rallying point. Though William was able to suppress the revolt relatively quickly, it was clear that his authority in England was far from secure. Soon after, further uprisings broke out. One of the most important occurred in 1069, when the Anglo-Saxon nobles in the north joined forces with Viking invaders to launch a rebellion in an effort to expel the Normans from England. This rebellion was fueled not only by anger at the Norman conquest but also by the lingering hope that the Viking raids could help restore Anglo-Saxon rule. The rebels laid siege to York, a major city in northern England, and were supported by the Viking king Sweyn Estridsson, who had long had an interest in English territory. The situation escalated quickly, and William, determined to assert his control, marched north to crush the rebellion. The Viking forces retreated, but the Anglo-Saxon rebels did not. William, now facing a major threat to his rule, took drastic action. In a brutal response, he conducted the Harrying of the North, one of the most infamous episodes of the early Norman reign. The Harrying of the North. In late 1069 and early 1070, William ordered a devastating military campaign to punish the North and quash any remaining rebellion. The Harrying of the North was not just a military response, it was a scorched earth policy. William's forces systematically destroyed towns, villages, and crops, leaving the region desolate. Thousands of Anglo-Saxons were killed, and many more were displaced. The harshness of the campaign devastated the North, and it had the desired effect. The rebellion was crushed, and the northern lords submitted to William's rule. Matilda's role during this crisis was both diplomatic and practical. While William was away leading the military campaign in the north, Matilda remained in England, overseeing the southern parts of the kingdom. She worked tirelessly to maintain the loyalty of the southern and western lords, some of whom were uneasy about William's growing use of force. She also helped to manage the relationships between the Norman nobles and the remaining Anglo-Saxon lords, trying to prevent further unrest. Matilda's political acumen and patience were tested to the limit during this period. She understood that while military force was necessary to maintain control, it was her diplomatic efforts that would ultimately secure the Norman presence in England. Despite the brutality of the harrying of the North, Matilda's work to ensure peace and stability in the regions that had not rebelled was crucial. She worked with church officials to gain their support, ensuring that the church continued to back the Norman monarchy, even in the face of widespread resentment. The long-term effects of the harrying of the North. Though the harrying of the North had successfully crushed the rebellion, it came at a heavy price. The widespread destruction of the northern regions left the people devastated, and the trauma of the campaign would be felt for generations. Many villages were never rebuilt, and the economy of the region was severely disrupted. Though the rebellion had been suppressed, the scars it left on the land were deep. Matilda, in her role as queen, continued to work tirelessly to repair the damage. She was instrumental in overseeing the rebuilding efforts in the south and in fostering loyalty among the Anglo-Saxon nobility who had not participated in the uprisings. She also worked to support the Norman Church in its efforts to strengthen the connection between the Anglo-Saxon population and the new Norman rulers. The Church, which had played such a central role in Anglo-Saxon society, was an essential partner in maintaining the legitimacy of William's reign. Even as the northern resistance was crushed, tensions between the Anglo-Saxon population and the Normans continued to simmer. The imposition of the feudal system, the replacement of the Anglo-Saxon aristocracy with Norman lords, and the widespread confiscation of land were all sources of tension. Matilda's role in overseeing land grants, making sure that some Anglo-Saxon nobles were integrated into the new system, and maintaining peace among the rebellious factions was crucial. Her diplomatic skills were put to the test as she sought to build a stable society from the wreckage left by the Norman conquest. Matilda's strategy for long-term stability. Despite the challenges posed by rebellion and resistance, Matilda's approach to governance was always rooted in long-term stability. While William focused on military matters, Matilda worked on strengthening the administrative apparatus of the kingdom. She helped establish the Domesday Book, a comprehensive survey of landholdings and resources across England. This document not only helped the Normans gain a clearer understanding of their new kingdom, but it also enabled Matilda and William to impose taxes more effectively and manage the vast estates that now comprised their realm. Matilda also worked with the Norman nobility to ensure that their interests were aligned with those of the Anglo-Saxons. Though the feudal system placed the king at the top of the social hierarchy, Matilda understood the importance of maintaining the loyalty of the lesser lords who governed on the king's behalf. She used her diplomatic influence to keep the court united and focused on the long-term goals of the Norman dynasty. Though the rebellions and unrest of the early years of William's reign had been difficult, Matilda's role in the consolidation of Norman rule was undeniable. Her ability to navigate the complexities of governance, from managing uprisings to overseeing the rebuilding of the kingdom, ensured that the legacy of the conquest would endure. As the years of William's reign stretched on, the early partnership between him and Matilda, the carefully forged alliance of political ambition and mutual respect, began to shift. William, once fiercely dependent on Matilda's advice, found himself increasingly consumed by the responsibilities of ruling two vast realms, England and Normandy. His military campaigns, his efforts to secure his position, and the unyielding pressure of leadership took their toll on the king. Meanwhile, Matilda, though still a strong and influential queen, found herself increasingly drawn into the quieter, but no less important, work of governance and family politics. In the early years after the conquest, their relationship had been defined by a sense of unity. Together, they had conquered a kingdom and built a lasting empire. Matilda had been more than just a queen, she had been William's partner, helping him navigate the complex political landscape of a fractured England. But as the years passed and the immediate challenges of securing the kingdom began to wane, William's attention shifted. He became more focused on maintaining control over his empire and securing his legacy. His personal ambition, once shared with Matilda, increasingly overshadowed the collaborative spirit that had once defined their relationship. Matilda, on the other hand, had always been deeply involved in the welfare of her children and the future of the dynasty. While William sought to expand and consolidate his power, Matilda found herself becoming the central figure in managing their children's upbringing and preparing them for the weight of leadership that would one day fall on their shoulders. The growing tensions between their sons, particularly Robert Curthose and William Rufus, presented additional challenges for Matilda. As the mother of the heirs to both Normandy and England, she had to mediate their disputes and ensure that their ambitions did not tear the family apart. Robert Curthose and William Rufus. The relationship between Matilda's two eldest sons, Robert and William Rufus, was always fraught with rivalry. Robert, as the eldest son, was meant to inherit Normandy, while William Rufus, the second son, was destined to inherit England. However, the rivalry between them would grow into a source of constant tension. Robert Curthose, despite being his father's chosen heir for Normandy, was not content with his position. He wanted more, he wanted England, or at least a larger share of his father's kingdom. This ambition, coupled with his growing resentment toward William, created a strained dynamic between the two brothers. Matilda, who had always been a stabilizing force in the family, now found herself caught between her husband's wishes for succession and the increasing desires of her sons. William Rufus, ever ambitious and eager to prove his worth, began to challenge his older brother's claim to Normandy. The brothers' rivalry grew more bitter, and tensions within the royal family were palpable. Matilda, ever the diplomat, worked tirelessly behind the scenes to prevent their rivalry from escalating into outright conflict. Yet, as the years passed, it became increasingly clear that the relationship between the brothers would continue to be strained, ultimately leading to conflicts that would play a significant role in the fate of the Norman dynasty. As the political landscape shifted and the brothers grew older, Matilda found herself taking a more active role in trying to mediate the growing rivalry. She hoped that with her guidance, Robert and William Rufus would understand the need for unity in maintaining the empire. But the ambition that burned within both of her sons made it difficult for her to rein in their growing desire for power. Matilda's growing influence and William's absence. During the latter years of William's reign, Matilda's role in the governance of both England and Normandy became even more central. Though William was still the undisputed ruler, his attention became increasingly divided between the demands of maintaining his territories and the need to secure his legacy. He found himself more often in Normandy, managing the complex politics of the duchy, while Matilda remained in England, overseeing the kingdom's administration. William's frequent absences placed Matilda in a position where she had to take charge. She was no longer just a queen consort fulfilling ceremonial duties. She was now the de facto ruler of England in William's absence. Her political acumen, honed over years of diplomacy and governance, made her an invaluable asset to the stability of the kingdom. Her role as a queen who actively engaged in the political and military challenges of the day had already been established. But now, Matilda's influence in the administration of the kingdom was even more pronounced. While William was embroiled in the political affairs of Normandy and Europe, Matilda focused on the day-to-day governance of England. She was instrumental in managing the kingdom's finances, advising on key political decisions, and maintaining the delicate balance between the Norman aristocracy and the remnants of the Anglo-Saxon elite. Though Matilda had always worked closely with William, her growing role in governance marked a subtle shift in their partnership. William, who had once relied on Matilda's guidance and support, now found himself turning inward, focused on the consolidation of his power and legacy. Matilda's increasing responsibility in managing the kingdom highlighted the divide between them. As William's focus on external affairs and securing his dynasty's future often left him disconnected from the immediate needs of the kingdom and family. The strain of leadership and William's health. By the 1070s, William's health began to deteriorate, and the pressures of ruling two realms took a toll on the once vibrant king. As William grew older, the physical and mental strain of managing his empire began to manifest. In the years leading up to his death, it became clear that his reign was nearing its end. The illness that plagued him left him less capable of making decisions with the same decisiveness he had once exhibited. And the relationship between him and Matilda shifted once again. Though Matilda had long been a pillar of strength, she now found herself in a position where she had to assume even more responsibility. As William's health faltered, Matilda took charge of his healthcare and began to prepare for the inevitable transition of power. It was during these final years that the dynamic between them shifted into one of necessity. Matilda could no longer simply be a supportive queen consort. She was now stepping into a leadership role of her own, both as a mother and as the protector of the Norman legacy. William's death and Matilda's role as protector. In 1087, William I died after a long and debilitating illness, leaving his empire to be divided between his sons. Matilda had worked tirelessly to ensure that William's rule would endure, but the loss of her husband marked the beginning of a new era for the Norman dynasty. William's death brought about a new set of challenges for Matilda. Now, Matilda found herself not just as the queen mother, but as a powerful matriarch of the Norman dynasty. Her sons, Robert Curthose and William Rufus, were the heirs to Normandy and England, but their relationship was fraught with tensions, and their differing ambitions would soon drive them apart. Matilda had always been the stabilizing force in the family, but now, her influence would be tested like never before. The future of the empire depended on how well she could guide her sons through the complexities of succession. And her ability to protect their father's legacy would shape the future of the Norman dynasty. By the late 1080s, William the Conqueror had ruled for over 2 decades, and his reign had transformed England and Normandy alike. Yet, as the years wore on, the physical toll of his wars and constant efforts to maintain control over his vast empire became apparent. William, once a formidable warrior and leader, began to experience a steady decline in both health and spirit. His body, battered by years of campaigns and the weight of his crown, could no longer keep pace with his ambitions. While William's decline was slow, it was inevitable. The once unshakable king found himself struggling with ailments and injuries, particularly following a disastrous accident in 1087 when his horse stumbled, causing him significant internal injuries. It was clear that the mighty king was no longer capable of governing with the same vigor he once had. Though he had always prided himself on his strength and resolve, his physical deterioration forced him to slow down, and he became more dependent on his wife, Matilda, to handle the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom. As William's health worsened, the question of succession became all the more pressing. William had divided his lands between his sons, Normandy to Robert Curthose and England to William Rufus, yet the political and personal tension between the two sons was palpable. Robert, the elder son, had long harbored resentment over his inheritance of Normandy, believing that he deserved a larger share of his father's empire. William Rufus, the second son, was determined to prove his worth as the ruler of England, and he was not willing to give up his claim to the throne easily. Matilda, meanwhile, found herself in the unenviable position of mediating between the two brothers, both of whom were driven by their own ambition. She understood the delicate balance she needed to maintain between her sons. Robert was her firstborn, but William Rufus was already entrenched as the King of England and a strong, capable ruler. Matilda's role as the mother of both potential heirs meant that she was the key figure in managing the relationship between them. Despite her efforts to keep peace within her family, the rift between Robert and William Rufus was too deep to reconcile completely. Robert had long desired England for himself, and William Rufus had no intention of relinquishing his throne to his older brother. The tension between the brothers would eventually tear at the fabric of the Norman dynasty. And Matilda, as their mother and protector of her husband's legacy, would have to navigate this treacherous landscape carefully. The final years of William's reign. In the final years of his reign, William was no longer the powerful king who had once led his armies with unyielding determination. He was weakened by illness and burdened by the ongoing challenges of maintaining a dual monarchy, England and Normandy. During these years, Matilda became even more involved in the governance of both realms. While William still held the title of king, it was Matilda who exercised much of the practical power in England. Especially as William's physical state deteriorated, Matilda had always been a formidable political figure. But in the absence of her husband's strong leadership, her influence grew significantly. She worked to maintain the fragile balance between the Anglo-Saxon lords and the Norman nobility in England, ensuring that both sides remained loyal to the crown. Her diplomacy and political expertise were essential in preserving the unity of the kingdom, even as rebellions and power struggles simmered beneath the surface. The death of William, though expected, marked the beginning of a turbulent new chapter for the family. Matilda's role as Queen Mother was more important than ever. The question of succession, which had lingered for years, was now unavoidable. The tension between her sons, Robert and William Rufus, would come to a head in the aftermath of William's death. William's death and the immediate aftermath. On September 9, 1087, William the Conqueror passed away at the age of approximately 59. His death, while expected, sent shockwaves through both England and Normandy. William had spent the final years of his life trying to secure the future of his kingdom. But his passing left a legacy that was marked by division and uncertainty. William Rufus, the second son, was quickly crowned King of England, fulfilling his long-held ambition. His coronation took place within days of his father's death, and he wasted no time in asserting his authority. However, his reign was not smooth. The rift between him and his older brother, Robert Curthose, was deepened by William's ascension to the throne. Robert had long harbored a sense of entitlement to the English throne, and his exclusion from the kingship created a volatile situation for the future of the Norman dynasty. Meanwhile, Robert Curthose, who had inherited Normandy, immediately began to assert his own authority in the duchy. The tension between the brothers was palpable, and it soon became clear that the once united Norman dynasty was now divided between two rival rulers, William Rufus in England and Robert in Normandy. Matilda, as the mother of both men, found herself caught in the middle of this growing conflict. though Matilda had worked for years to ensure her children's futures. The tensions between them threatened to unravel everything she had fought for. She was no longer just the wife of the late William the Conqueror but a powerful and influential figure in her own right. Matilda's role as a mother, advisor, and protector of the family legacy was put to the test in the aftermath of William's death. Matilda's efforts to maintain unity. In the wake of William's death, Matilda's influence became even more critical. She was not just the mother of the heirs but a woman who had helped build the foundations of the Norman Empire. Her political acumen was needed more than ever to prevent the dynasty from collapsing under the weight of sibling rivalry. Matilda worked tirelessly behind the scenes to mediate between her sons. She recognized that the empire was at a crossroads and that the divisions between England and Normandy could lead to a weakening of both realms. She sought to broker peace between her sons, but their rivalry was deeply entrenched, and neither was willing to compromise. Matilda, for all her wisdom and diplomatic skill, could not bring the brothers together. The divisions between them would soon play out on the battlefield, with their conflict leading to years of tension, division, and strife. The future of the Norman dynasty. Though Matilda was unable to prevent the growing divide between her sons, her efforts were not in vain. She had ensured that both England and Normandy were left in strong hands, with capable rulers at the helm. Her legacy, however, was not just in her son's ability to rule but in her role as the architect of the Norman Empire. She had helped William the Conqueror build an empire that would survive for decades, even through the divisions that would later emerge. In the years following William's death, Matilda's role as a mother, queen, and protector of the dynasty continued to be crucial. She would remain a powerful figure in the political landscape of both England and Normandy. Even as the tensions between her sons grew, her efforts to secure her family's legacy, despite the personal and political challenges she faced, were a testament to her strength and resolve. Matilda's life, and her role in the Norman conquest, would become a defining chapter in the history of both England and Normandy. Her ability to navigate the complex world of medieval politics, protect her children's futures, and safeguard the legacy of her late husband would leave an indelible mark on history. The death of William the Conqueror in 1087 brought about a new and turbulent chapter in the history of the Norman dynasty. While William had built an empire that stretched across both England and Normandy, he had left behind a divided legacy, a kingdom marked by territorial divisions and the fragile relationships within his family. As the Norman Empire teetered on the edge of potential collapse, Matilda, now a widow, found herself at the center of a power struggle that would test her strength and resilience like never before. Upon William's death, the empire was divided between his two sons. William Rufus, the second son, was crowned King of England. His reign was immediately challenged by the rebellion of those who had once supported his father, and the resentment from Anglo-Saxon nobles who had never fully accepted Norman rule. Meanwhile, Robert Curthose, the elder son, inherited the Duchy of Normandy, but he was never content with his lot. He had long desired a larger share of his father's empire. And now, with England under William Rufus's control, Robert saw an opportunity to expand his power and claims. The immediate aftermath of William's death was marked by a growing rift between the two brothers, and Matilda found herself caught in the middle. As the mother of both sons, Matilda had always worked to ensure that they were prepared for the responsibilities that lay ahead. Yet, she never could have anticipated the fierce rivalry that would unfold between Robert and William Rufus after their father's passing. The conflict between the two brothers became an existential threat not only to their family but to the very stability of the Norman Empire. Robert Curthose's ambition. Robert Curthose, despite being the eldest son, had always been overshadowed by his younger brother William Rufus, who was far more assertive and politically astute. Robert, though capable, was plagued by indecision and a sense of entitlement that prevented him from truly consolidating power. While he inherited Normandy, he was constantly frustrated by the limitations of his inheritance, feeling that he was owed more, specifically England, which he believed should have been his as the elder son. The tension between the two brothers escalated quickly after William's death. Robert, angered by the fact that he had not been crowned King of England, began to make overtures to rebel against William Rufus. In 1088, Robert sought to challenge William Rufus's reign, leading a rebellion with the support of several Anglo-Saxon nobles who resented the Normans. Matilda, caught between her sons' conflicting ambitions, found herself torn between her loyalty to William Rufus, the reigning king, and her deep maternal love for Robert, her firstborn. Despite Robert's rebellion, he was unable to gain full control of England, and the conflict soon ended in stalemate. However, the tension between the brothers continued to simmer. Robert's failure to claim England did not quell his ambition. Instead, he continued to push for greater control, leading to several years of tension, marked by skirmishes and territorial disputes, which further divided the Norman Empire. Matilda's role during this time was both a mediator and a strategist. While she had hoped for peace and unity between her sons, it became clear that their rivalry was deep-rooted and would not be easily resolved. Matilda attempted to act as an intermediary between them, writing letters, making pleas for reconciliation, and using her position as mother to try to bring about a resolution. But neither Robert nor William Rufus was willing to compromise, and Matilda's diplomatic efforts were, at times, in vain. The situation was further complicated by the growing discontent in England, where William Rufus's rule was under constant scrutiny, and the Anglo-Saxon lords who had once been loyal to the Conqueror began to question the legitimacy of the Norman reign. William Rufus's rule and the growing resentment, while Matilda's heart ached for her sons and the growing conflict between them. Her role as Queen Mother meant that she was expected to maintain the stability of the realm. Especially in the wake of William's death, she had worked tirelessly to ensure the success of the Norman dynasty. But William Rufus, though capable, had his own struggles to contend with. His reign in England was marked by challenges both internal and external. The Anglo-Saxon nobility, who had never fully accepted Norman rule, began to push back against William Rufus's leadership. His heavy-handed tactics and his frequent demands for money and resources from the nobles further alienated the Anglo-Saxon population. Matilda, ever the diplomat, sought to calm the unrest in England by encouraging the king to show more leniency toward the native lords. But William Rufus, known for his harshness and his desire to maintain a strong, centralized monarchy, was not willing to make concessions. The divisions between the Anglo-Saxon and Norman populations only deepened under his rule, and Matilda could do little to mediate between the two factions. As the political situation in England became more unstable, Matilda began to take a more active role in the governance of Normandy. Where Robert Curthose, her eldest son, continued to rule, Normandy, though peaceful for the time being, was facing its own challenges. Robert, though a noble and capable leader, was unable to unify his duchy in the same way his father had done. The duchy was divided by factionalism, and Robert's inability to effectively manage the lords of Normandy made him vulnerable to both internal and external threats. Matilda, aware of these challenges, worked to stabilize her son's rule, often intervening in Normandy's political affairs to prevent a full breakdown of order. The weight of Matilda's legacy. As Matilda watched the rivalry between her sons tear at the fabric of their kingdom, she knew that the unity that had once characterized the Norman conquest was now in jeopardy. Her efforts to maintain peace were exhausted by the relentless ambition of her sons. Yet, even as the conflict continued to unravel their family and their empire, Matilda remained a figure of strength, a mother whose loyalty to her children outweighed the personal struggles that consumed them. In the years following William's death, Matilda's role as the matriarch of the Norman dynasty became more pronounced. Despite the ongoing conflict between Robert and William Rufus, she worked tirelessly to ensure that the empire, split between her two sons, remained intact. Her diplomatic efforts to mediate between them continued, but as the years passed, it became clear that the brothers' rivalry would leave lasting scars on the family. The Norman dynasty that Matilda and William the Conqueror had built was now facing its most significant test. Matilda's legacy, however, would be defined not just by her efforts to secure the future of her sons but by her strength, resilience, and commitment to the empire that she and William had forged. She had been a co-architect of the Norman conquest, a queen who had helped consolidate William's power and ensure the survival of the dynasty. But now, as the challenges of succession and family discord threatened to divide her legacy, Matilda's role as a mother and protector would be tested like never before. The years following William the Conqueror's death were turbulent ones for the Norman dynasty. The rivalry between Robert Curthose and William Rufus grew deeper, with their ambitions and personal grievances threatening to unravel the empire that William and Matilda had worked so hard to establish. Yet, despite the division between her sons and the challenges that lay ahead, Matilda's legacy remained an indelible force in the history of England and Normandy. In the midst of these struggles, Matilda's role as a mother and a queen was one that transcended the immediate political conflicts. While the empire she and William had built appeared to be fracturing, the strength of her influence, both as a diplomat and as a protector of her children, ensured that the groundwork she had laid for the Norman dynasty would endure. For Matilda, her greatest concern was always the future of her children. She had raised them with the understanding that they were not merely heirs to titles, but stewards of the legacy she and William had built. Even though Robert and William Rufus's rivalry threatened to tear the family apart, Matilda remained steadfast in her belief that they could each contribute to the future of the empire, if only they could learn to work together. But as the years wore on, Matilda's dreams of reconciliation began to dim. Robert's inability to manage Normandy effectively and William Rufus's increasingly authoritarian rule in England meant that the empire, once united under William the Conqueror, was now divided. Yet, despite this division, Matilda's influence remained. The seeds of the Norman legacy had been planted too deeply to be easily uprooted. Matilda's legacy was not only political, it was deeply personal. She had been a mother who cared for her children's futures, guiding them with the wisdom of years and the lessons she had learned from her own life. As a wife, she had supported William I and his monumental conquest of England and had been a key partner in consolidating Norman rule. But above all, she was a woman who understood the complexities of power, love, and sacrifice. The long-term impact of Matilda's legacy. While her son's rivalry continued to define much of the political landscape in the years after William's death, the Norman dynasty itself survived. William Rufus's reign as King of England, though contentious and marked by struggles with his brother, would last until his death in 1100, when he was succeeded by his younger brother, Henry I, a son of Matilda and William, would ultimately reunite England and Normandy under one crown. Henry's reign brought stability to the kingdom, and it was under his rule that the legal and administrative foundations that Matilda had helped establish were solidified. Matilda's efforts in shaping the early years of her children's reigns helped ensure that they understood the importance of unity, even if they could not always achieve it themselves. Her diplomatic influence, her ability to govern in William's absence, and her commitment to the future of the dynasty had lasting effects on both Normandy and England. Though she could not prevent the conflicts between Robert and William Rufus, her efforts to manage the broader scope of governance ensured that the empire was left in a position to endure. Even through the internal struggles, beyond politics, Matilda's influence was felt in the cultural and religious spheres as well. As queen consort, she had been a patron of the arts and a supporter of the church. Her involvement in the establishment of religious institutions helped cement the Church's role as a central institution in both England and Normandy. The influence of the Church, which had supported William's conquest and consolidation of power, would continue to shape the future of England for centuries. Matilda's role in cultivating the Church's support, especially in the aftermath of the conquest, was one of the quieter yet crucial aspects of her legacy. Matilda's final years and death. Matilda lived out the final years of her life in relative obscurity compared to the political heights she had once reached. After William's death, she withdrew somewhat from the public eye, spending her later years in the court of her son, Henry I. She was still an influential figure behind the scenes, offering counsel to her son and advising him on matters of governance and the future of the dynasty. By this point, her greatest desire was to see the family united, but she knew that the rivalries between her sons would ultimately leave their mark on the history of the Norman dynasty. Matilda died in 1083, a few years before her husband's passing, and her death marked the end of an era. Yet, the empire she had helped create, and the dynasty she had nurtured, would survive long after her. The events she had set in motion, William's conquest of England, the consolidation of Norman power, and the eventual reunification of England and Normandy under her son Henry I, would echo through the centuries. Her legacy would continue through her descendants, Who would rule England for generations? The strong, determined, and intelligent woman who had once stood beside William the Conqueror had left an indelible mark on history. Though her influence was often overshadowed by the deeds of her husband and sons. Matilda of Flanders had been instrumental in shaping the course of English and European history. Matilda's enduring impact. In the years following her death, Matilda's contributions to the Norman Empire would be remembered, if not always fully acknowledged. Her diplomatic skill, her ability to manage both Normandy and England during some of their most challenging times, and her unyielding dedication to her children's futures were all integral to the success of the empire William the Conqueror had built. As the first queen consort of England and the matriarch of the Norman dynasty, Matilda's influence would live on in the governance, laws, and traditions that shaped England for centuries. Matilda of Flanders was, without a doubt, one of the most influential women of her time. While her story was often overshadowed by the military achievements of her husband and the reigns of her sons, her role as a mother, queen, and political strategist ensured that the empire she helped build would endure long after her death. Her legacy would remain, not just in the pages of history but in the very foundations of the English and Norman kingdoms that she had worked so tirelessly to create.